Hi, guys. Thank you for coming back to watch A Single Mother's Diary. This week, we're going to be talking about shame. We're going to be talking about embarrassment. We're going to be talking about that feeling. I know I'm not the only one. We're going to be talking about that feeling of shame and how we can overcome it and how we can just keep pressing forward with our children without feeling ashamed. If you have not already liked this video, like this video. If you have not already subscribed to the channel, please subscribe to the channel. New videos will be out every single Saturday, and we will be discussing and talking about new things every week. So please stay tuned if you want to. Hi guys. All right, so I'm in my car today. This is like kind of gonna be like vlog style because I'm on the go. It's Saturday. I promised you a video and you're gonna get it. So today's topic, as you know, is shame, and we're gonna be dealing with shame and how you can overcome shame. So if you're feeling shame or if you have felt shame, you just want to continue to watch, and I hope that this helps you, blesses you, and helps you to overcome that. And hopefully the references and the tools that I give you are ones that you can continue to go back to and help you to overcome shame. So what is shame? Shame is defined as a painful feeling of humiliation or distress caused by the consciousness of wrong or foolish behavior. The adjective of the word shame is ashamed, which is embarrassed or guilty because of one's actions, characteristics, or associations. So that's how you feel. So you feel embarrassed, you feel guilty because of what you did, which is that conscious behavior of that conscious wrong or foolish behavior that you did. So for me, that's when I became pregnant with my first child. I was a sophomore in college. I dropped out of school. I was pregnant. We went into the summer, and then I didn't return fall. I didn't return in the fall because I was pregnant. And I felt so ashamed. One, personally, because education was important to me. I wanted to go back to school. I wanted to still have fun with my friends. And so I was embarrassed. At that point, I knew a few girls like through high school that had kids, but I just didn't think that would happen to me. And I still felt, even as a sophomore in college, that I was way too young. I didn't know what I was doing, and I felt embarrassed that I was pregnant. So I decided not to go back to school. That was a form of shame. I also felt shame just to my parents, to my family. I felt like I brought shame to our family name, because my mom and dad are both encouragers and both mentors, and both people who speak into the lives of other people. I felt like I embarrassed them because I felt like, well, people would feel like they couldn't save their daughter, or they couldn't speak life into their daughter, or they didn't teach their daughter, and of course that's not the case, but I felt embarrassed for them because of the actions that I did. And I just felt so ashamed. I just felt so embarrassed. And I just remember that being such an overwhelming feeling. And every single time I would cry about it and I would talk about it with my mom or my dad, it was just shame. That was like the only thing that I couldn't get over. And months would go by. I'm saying I'm 9 months pregnant. I'm 8 months pregnant. I'm far along in my pregnancy. I'm over the initial shock. I'm over not going back to school in the fall. I'm over all of that. But I could not shake the feeling of shame. I could not shake that feeling. And I just could not shake that feeling. So that's what shame is. And I'm going to give you guys an example in the Bible of shame. And we're going to go all the way back to the beginning. Genesis chapter 2. This is when Adam and Eve were created. So we know that we had Adam first. And from Adam, God made Eve. And they're in the garden. And the tree of knowledge of good and evil, they were not supposed to eat from. They weren't even supposed to touch it, or they would die. God told them that if they touch it or ate from it, they would die. But there is other fruit, there are other trees in the garden that they could touch and that they can eat, and that's how they were going to live. And Adam and Eve, when they were made in chapter 2 verse 25, it says Adam and his wife were both naked and they felt no shame. They weren't aware of what good and evil were at the moment. Before they ate of the fruit, they did not know what good and evil was. So when they were naked in the garden, they were naked in the garden. It was nothing more, nothing less. They weren't embarrassed. They didn't feel like they needed to cover. They didn't feel like they needed to hide. That's just what it was. Satan came to Eve in chapter 3 And he said, well, surely you'll be like God. I'm paraphrasing, but you'll be like God if you eat of this fruit. You know, you'll have the knowledge of good and evil. And it says, it goes on to say, and I'm paraphrasing, that Eve was deceived by him. It looked pleasing to the eye, and yeah, it was fruit, so it definitely edible, you know, and it looked so pleasing to the eye. She ate of the fruit, and then she got her husband to eat of the fruit. And immediately they felt shame. They felt ashamed. They went and they covered themselves because they were made aware that they were naked. That they were naked. They'd been naked. They'd been naked in the garden already. But they felt ashamed, and they had the knowledge now of good and evil, so they knew that they were naked, and they went and they covered themselves, and they hid in the garden, and they hid from God. They hid from God. And that's Genesis chapter 2 and 3, and I will put that down here so that you guys don't forget it. If you want to go and read the whole chapters of that entire story, you can go right ahead if you're not already familiar with that Bible story. I will leave it down below so that you guys can go and read it in its fullness, because I was paraphrasing. But she felt ashamed, and they went and hid. So what is it that we do? So when I got pregnant and I felt ashamed, I hid. Y'all, I did not go back to school. I was embarrassed. Yeah, I could have went to school pregnant. Some of y'all do it. Some of y'all have done it. I know women that have been in school pregnant. I was too embarrassed to go back to school pregnant. I could have. You know, I was too embarrassed to go back to school pregnant because of the shame that I felt. I hid. I stayed at home. Pregnant and all. I stayed at home. I stayed at my mom and dad's house. At the time, I wasn't going to church, but that would be the last place I'd wanted to go, was to church. But I can tell you, I started going to church when I was pregnant with my son Makai, when I was feeling shame and guilty. But at the time, I wasn't going at the time. But that would have been the last place I'd want to be, was church at that moment. I know better than that now, but then that probably was the last place I wanted to be, was to be in church, pregnant, not married, young, you know, not even young, because you can be young and married and have kids and live happily ever after, but to be young, not married, quit school, dropped out of college, and then in church, that just wasn't something I was ready to face. That wasn't something that I wanted to do. That wasn't where that's just not what I wanted to do. I was too embarrassed. That's a form of shame. I was embarrassed because of that wrong or foolish behavior. That's what shame is, that wrong or foolish behavior of what I knew was wrong and foolish in my mind. You know, I felt shame. So Adam and Eve, they hid. I hid. I didn't go back to school that fall. I definitely didn't go to church at the moment. The type of person that I am, I immediately told my sister, and she immediately told my mom and dad, because we have a close, tight-knit family. She immediately called my dad at work, you know, and told him. But I even wanted to hide from my mom and dad when they got home from work that day. And surprisingly, they took the news very well, but I was ashamed. I wanted to hide. I didn't even want to be home when they got home, you know, to tell them. I didn't want to. I was ashamed. I was embarrassed. I felt guilty because of the actions that I had, so I hid. Did you guys hide? Did you tell anybody? What did you do? Did you hide yourself? And don't say, when I say hide, I don't mean in a corner, but what did you hide yourself in? Was it addiction maybe that you turned to? Was it a partner or a person that you turned to hide those feelings of what you've done, or the feelings of the outcome of something? So hiding can be in all different type of things, and it's a combination of pride and failure to live up to other people's expectations. That's a result of shame. You then become prideful and you failed up to live up to other people's expectations because you're hiding. Adam and Eve failed to live up to God's expectation. He told them not to eat. That was disobedient. He told them not to eat of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, and they did. So they were punished. If you continue In the chapter, they were punished. God gave the serpent a punishment. He gave Adam a punishment, and he gave Eve a punishment. There were punishments, and then they were banned from the garden. They had to go. They had to get out. They had to get out of the garden. But there was a punishment that followed. So we hide, but they stood guilty before God when they did that. They stood guilty before God, and they were subject to God's punishment and to his judgment, right? And so we feel that we are subject to people's punishment or people's judgment. People's judgment. I was afraid of people's judgment. I was afraid of people's judgment at school. I was afraid of my mom and dad's judgment. I was afraid of my church's judgment, my mom and dad's church's judgment, because I was going, not every Sunday, but I was going. They knew of me. They knew, they definitely knew I was Patrick and Chiquita's daughter. You know, I was afraid of judgment. I was afraid of judgment and those expectations that people have of you. You feel like you have to live up to that. I was afraid of judgment. So what do? We hide. And that's what Adam and Eve did. They hid. And pride will allow you to use whatever, use anything and everything to keep you in that place hidden. Because you don't want to speak the truth. Because you don't want to you're avoiding exposure. That's what you're doing. You're avoiding exposure. So you hide. You don't want to come clean. You're avoiding that exposure. So you're hidden. But let me tell you something. When God died on Calvary, that shame died with him. There was no more shame. All of our sins were covered. All of our sins were covered when he died and he went to Calvary. And shame is in that category.